The lake shimmered under the soft glow of dawn, but the peace was shattered by the pulsing red and blue lights slicing through the morning mist. I stood on the creaky wooden deck of my cabin, barefoot, clutching the worn blanket I'd slept in, my heart racing as two police officers climbed out of their cruiser, sirens still echoing in the quiet air, and there, like a storm cloud in human form, was Karen, the HOA president with a reputation that could make grown men flinch. Her arms were crossed so tightly it looked like she was trying to keep her smugness from spilling out, her face lit with the kind of glee you'd expect from someone who just caught a thief red-handed. "That's her, officers," she barked, jabbing a finger at me like I was public enemy number one. "She's the trespasser who broke into this cabin last night. This is private property, and she has no business being here." The officers approached, their boots crunching on the gravel, one with a hand resting lightly on his holster. "Ma'am, we need to see some ID," the taller one said, his voice steady, but carrying that no-nonsense edge. Karen's smirk widened, like she was already picturing her victory speech. "You'll thank me for this," she told them, her tone dripping with self-righteous triumph. "People like her think they can just waltz in here and break the rules, not on my watch." My blood simmered as I reached into my bag, fingers shaking not from fear, but from the fire of indignation burning inside me. I opened my mouth to explain, but Karen cut me off, her voice sharp as a whip. "Don't fall for her lies. She's not one of us. I've never seen her at a single HOA meeting. Probably some squatter who snuck into the Johnsons' old cabin." The officer shot her a glance before turning back to me, while across the street, neighbors began to cluster, their whispers buzzing like a curious swarm. The whole scene felt like something ripped from a drama flick, and I was caught in the middle. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with an HOA. We'd love to narrate your story on our channel. Officer repeated, "Can you explain why you're here?" Before I could answer, Karen stormed closer, her finger wagging in my face. "She has no explanation because she doesn't belong here. Arrest her." That was the moment I slowly pulled out the key to the cabin, my cabin, and held it up for everyone to see. Karen's smug expression cracked for the first time, her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed. Something in her face said she was starting to realize she had made a mistake, but it was too late. And then I handed the officer my ID. He looked at it, his brows lifting slightly as he read the name. His expression changed from suspicion to surprise. "Ma'am," he said slowly, almost with respect, "you're the owner." Karen's mouth fell open. "Owner? That's impossible. She can't be." The officer turned to her. "She's not just the owner. She's the new chair of the HOA." Karen froze. Her face drained of color and she stumbled back like the ground had just vanished under her feet. The crowd gasped. And that, my friends, is where everything started to fall apart for her. But to understand how we got to this point, you need to know what led up to that night. Hey everyone, before we go back to the beginning, tell me where are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments because this story is going to be wild. It all started a few months ago when I, Rachel Evans, decided to take a break from my busy life in the city. After years of hard work, I finally inherited my family's lake cabin, a place full of childhood memories and peace. The cabin sat on the edge of a beautiful lake surrounded by tall pine trees, far from the chaos of urban life. I had been planning to come back for months to breathe, to heal, to find myself again. When I arrived, the place looked just as I remembered, only better. The lake sparkled under the sun. The wooden deck creaked the way it always had, and the scent of pine filled the air. It felt like coming home. But there was something new. An HOA, apparently. While I was away, a group of neighbors had formed one, claiming it would protect the community. At the center of it all was Karen Mitchell, a woman in her 50s with a perfect bob haircut and an even sharper tongue. She loved control, she loved power, and she loved making sure everyone knew it. The first time I met her, she came strutting up to me like she owned the whole lake. "Hi, I'm Karen," The HOA president, she said, scanning me from head to toe. You must be new here. I'm Rachel, I replied, smiling. Actually, I'm not new. This is my family's cabin. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, well, you'll need to read the HOA rules. We have a strict policy here. No late-night fires, no pets without approval, and no unauthorized guests. I laughed a little, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. From that moment on, she made it her mission to make my life difficult. She left notes on my door about violations that didn't exist. She complained about my dog barking, even though I didn't have one. She even accused me of parking wrong in my own driveway. At first, I tried to be kind. I offered her coffee when she came by with her complaints. I waved at her every morning, but the more I tried, the nastier she became. The final straw came when she threatened to tow my car because it was too close to the edge of the road. That's when I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. What happened at that meeting is something I'll never forget. That night at the meeting, Karen stood at the front like a queen, addressing her subjects. We must keep our community safe, she said. There have been strangers lurking around. We need to tighten security. She glanced at me, her eyes full of venom. The other members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked sympathetic, others just afraid of her. I raised my hand. With all due respect, Karen, I own my property. I don't need permission to exist here. The room fell silent. Karen's lips curled into a fake smile. Oh, Rachel, you just don't understand how things work here. Oh, I understood perfectly. That's when I decided to take things into my own hands. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let her bully me anymore. But little did I know, she was already planning something worse. One evening, after a long day kayaking on the lake, I came back to my cabin and decided to stay overnight. It was peaceful. The stars were bright. I fell asleep wrapped in my blanket on the deck, the cool breeze brushing against my face. And then I woke up to flashing lights, sirens, and Karen screaming at the top of her lungs that I was a trespasser. She had called 911, but the look on her face when the officers revealed who I really was, that was priceless. Still, this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't going to give up so easily, because that very night as the officers left and the neighbors whispered among themselves, I saw her standing at the end of the driveway staring at me with eyes full of hate. She wasn't done, and neither was I. What happened next? Well, let's just say things got even crazier, because later, that same night as I went inside to lock my door, I heard footsteps on the deck. Slow, deliberate footsteps. When I turned around, the shadow standing there was not the police, not a neighbor. It was Karen, and she was holding something in her hand. The porch light flickered against the darkness, revealing Karen's silhouette. Her lips were pressed so tightly together they almost disappeared. And in her hand, she clutched a clipboard like it was a weapon. Karen, I said calmly, trying to keep my voice steady. What are you doing here? She stepped forward, the boards creaking under her feet. You think you're clever, don't you? Showing off in front of the cops, embarrassing me in front of the whole neighborhood. Her voice was cold, laced with venom. I crossed my arms. You called 911 on the owner of the cabin. That's on you. She jabbed the clipboard toward me. Not for long. I have every violation you've made right here. And trust me, the HOA will make sure you're gone. You won't last a month here. I took a deep breath, staring at her. Part of me wanted to snap back to tell her she had no power over me. But another part knew this was just the beginning of her games. Before I could say anything, a branch cracked in the woods nearby. We both turned our heads sharply. The night was so still that even the smallest sound felt like a threat. Karen's bravado faltered for a second. You should go home, Karen, I said softly. It's not safe to wander around here at night. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the dark trees, then back at me. For a brief moment, I saw fear flicker across her face. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed away, muttering under her breath. As soon as she disappeared into the shadows, I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I knew she wasn't giving up. This woman thrived on control, and she would do anything to get it back. The next morning, the lake shimmered under the sun as if nothing had happened. Birds chirped, and the world felt calm again. I sat on the deck, with a cup of coffee, watching the water ripple gently. For a moment, I let myself believe everything would be fine. That peace didn't last long. Around noon, a group of neighbors gathered near my driveway. I overheard their whispers. "She's the owner," one woman said, clutching her coffee mug. "I heard she's the new HOA chair," another whispered. "No way. Karen won't let that happen." I decided to step out and greet them. "Morning," I said with a smile. They turned, looking surprised but friendly. A man in his 60s named Tom introduced himself. "We're glad you're back, Rachel. It's been years since anyone cared about this place." Their words warmed my heart. They shared stories of how Karen had slowly taken control, using fear and intimidation to silence everyone. "She finds us for everything," one woman said, shaking her head. "Even for hanging laundry outside." I listened, nodding. "You all deserve better than this. Things are going to change." Their eyes lit up with hope. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. But Karen wasn't going to sit back and watch me win people over. Later that evening, as I returned from a walk by the lake, I noticed something strange. The lock on my gate was broken. My heart skipped a beat. Slowly, I walked up the path, my senses on high alert. When I reached the deck, I froze. There were muddy footprints leading straight to my cabin door. My hands shook as I unlocked it and stepped inside. Everything looked normal at first. Then, I saw it. My family photo had been knocked to the floor. The glass shattered. Someone had been inside. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was it Karen? Was she trying to scare me? I called the sheriff, who came and took a report. He assured me they would keep an eye on things, but I could tell he thought it was just a prank. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the start of something much bigger. That night, I double-checked all the locks, pulled the curtains tight, and kept my phone close. The lake was quiet, too quiet. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. Around midnight, I heard it. The sound of footsteps on the gravel outside. Slow, crunching, getting closer. I grabbed the flashlight and peered through the blinds. My heart stopped. Standing there at the edge of the driveway was Karen. She wasn't alone. Behind her were two men I didn't recognize, both wearing dark jackets. They stood silently watching my cabin like wolves circling their prey. And then Karen smiled, the kind of smile that promised trouble. Before I could react, she raised her hand and pointed directly at my cabin. The two men started walking toward me. I backed away from the window, my pulse racing. What was she planning? Who were those men? I barely had time to grab my phone when bang. A loud crash echoed through the night as something slammed against my front door. The crash rattled the entire cabin. My heart slammed against my chest as I stumbled back, clutching my phone. Outside, the men pounded on the door again, harder this time, while Karen's voice cut through the night like a knife. "Come out, Rachel. You're breaking HOA rules by hiding in there. You don't belong here." Her voice dripped with venom. But there was something else underneath it. Panic. She was desperate to scare me into leaving. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The dispatcher answered quickly and I whispered my address, explaining that there were intruders at my door. As I spoke, another crash shook the cabin. The men were trying to break in. "Officers are on their way," the dispatcher assured me. I hung up and grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy fireplace poker. My hands gripped it tightly as the door hinges groaned under the pressure of their kicks. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the pounding stopped. Silence. I held my breath, frozen in place. Slowly, I peeked through the curtains. They were gone. Karen and the two men had disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the echo of their footsteps fading into the night. My entire body trembled, but I stood my ground. Minutes later, red and blue lights cut through the trees. The officers searched the area, but found nothing. One of them, a younger cop with a kind face, pulled me aside. "Do you know who those men were?" he asked. "No," I said, my voice shaky. "But I know who sent them." He nodded slowly, understanding. "We'll keep a patrol around here tonight. Call us if you see anything." After they left, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, staring at the broken lock. I felt vulnerable, but I also felt something else. Anger. Karen had crossed a line. The next morning, I walked into town to clear my head. The sun was shining and the lake was calm, but inside me, a storm was brewing. On the way back, I ran into Tom, the kind neighbor I'd met before. "You okay?" he asked, noticing the dark circles under my eyes. "Not really," I admitted. "Someone tried to break into my cabin last night." His eyes widened. "Karen, she was there," I said. "With two men." Tom clenched his jaw. "She's been pulling this kind of stuff for years, but no one ever stood up to her until you." His words sparked something inside me. Maybe that was why she hated me so much, because I wasn't afraid to challenge her. We spent the rest of the afternoon reinforcing my doors and windows. Other neighbors joined in quietly offering their support. It warmed my heart to see they were tired of Karen's bullying, too. For a few hours, it felt like things were getting better. But peace never lasts long when Karen is involved. That evening, I decided to attend another HOA meeting, determined to face her head-on. The room buzzed with tension as I walked in. Karen stood at the front, her arms crossed, her eyes burning holes into me. Well, she said loudly. "Look, who decided to show up? The troublemaker." I ignored her and took a seat. As the meeting started, she launched into a long rant about property violations and unapproved changes. Every word dripped with malice directed at me. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up calmly. "For the record," I said, my voice clear, "I am the legal owner of my property. I have every right to be there, and I will not be bullied by anyone, especially not by someone who uses fear to control this community." The room erupted in whispers. Karen's face turned bright red. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she hissed. I met her glare with a steady gaze. "Oh, I think I do." For a moment, we stood locked in a silent battle. Then, without warning, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Everyone sat in stunned silence. That night, I thought, the worst was over. I was wrong. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by the sound of engines roaring. I rushed to the window and saw several cars pulling up to my driveway, their headlights cutting through the darkness. One of the cars had a trailer attached. My stomach dropped. Karen stepped out holding a megaphone, her voice echoing across the lake. "This is your final warning, Rachel. Leave or face the consequences." The men from the night before jumped out of the other vehicles carrying tools. And then, to my horror, they started cutting the power lines to my cabin. The lights flickered and died, plunging everything into darkness. That was when I knew this wasn't just harassment anymore. This was war. The darkness swallowed the cabin whole. Only the moonlight spilling through the trees gave me enough to see by. My heart pounded as the hum of the generator outside faded with the severed cables. I crept toward the window, peeking out just enough to see Karen standing there with that same wicked smirk. The two men worked quickly, cutting wires, smashing my outdoor lights while she shouted orders like a general in battle. "Take down that satellite dish, too," she barked. "She thinks she's above the rules. Let's see how she likes it when she's cut off from the world." My hands trembled, but not from fear anymore. This was rage. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 again. "They're destroying my property." I told the dispatcher, "You need to send someone now." As I spoke, one of the men climbed onto my porch. He carried a crowbar and started prying at the door frame. The sound of wood splintering made my stomach twist. The dispatcher assured me help was coming, but I knew the police wouldn't arrive in time. I had to act quietly. I slipped into the kitchen and grabbed the biggest frying pan I could find. My legs shook, but I tightened my grip. The man forced the door open halfway before I burst out from behind it, swinging the pan with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with a loud clang, and he stumbled back, swearing. "Stay away from my home," I shouted, my voice echoing through the night. The other man turned, stunned, and Karen's mouth fell open. For the first time, I saw fear flash in her eyes. "You're crazy," she screamed. "No," I said through clenched teeth. "I'm done being your victim." The men hesitated, unsure whether to continue. In that moment, the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights cut through the darkness, growing brighter with every second. Karen spun around, panic, twisting her face. "Go now," she yelled at the men. They bolted toward the car's engines roaring as they sped off into the night. Karen tried to follow, but the police arrived just in time, blocking her path. Two officers stepped out, shining their flashlights at her. "What's going on here?" one demanded. Karen stammered, her confidence slipping. She's violating HOA rules. She attacked my men, your men." The officer asked sharply, "Who are they?" Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The officers turned to me. "Mum, are you okay?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "But they tried to break in. They cut my power. They trespassed on my property." The officer's jaw tightened. "We'll handle this." They questioned Karen for several minutes. She tried to spin her story, claiming she was protecting the neighborhood, but the evidence was clear. The broken lock, the cut wires, the smashed lights. Finally, the officers escorted her to the back of the patrol car. For a moment, I thought it was over. But as they put her inside, she turned to me, her eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't the end, Rachel. You'll regret this." Her words sent a chill down my spine. The next morning, the lake looked peaceful again, but the atmosphere in the neighborhood was tense. Some residents came by to check on me, offering kind words and even bringing breakfast. "You stood up to her," Tom said with a proud smile. "Nobody's ever done that before." Their support warmed my heart, but I knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her don't stop until they've destroyed everything in their path. For the next few days, things were strangely quiet. Too quiet. No notes on my door. No shouting. No unwanted visits. It almost felt like she had given up, but I knew better. On the fourth night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed something strange. My security camera, recently installed after the last attack, was dead. Someone had cut the power to it. My pulse quickened. I stepped onto the deck, scanning the woods. The air was still, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And then I saw it, a flicker of movement in the trees. A flashlight beam sweeping across the ground. Karen's voice whispering orders. She was back. But this time, she wasn't alone. At least 5 figures emerged from the woods, all wearing dark hoodies. They crept toward my cabin like predators closing in on prey. My phone buzzed in my hand as I called the police once again. But as I lifted it to my ear, something smashed against the window. A rock shattering the glass. I dropped to the floor as the hooded figure surrounded the cabin. Karen's voice rose above the chaos, cold and sharp. "Burn it down." The words, "burn it down," sliced through the night like a knife. My breath caught in my throat as the hooded figures closed in. One of them pulled out a canister, shaking it, and I caught the unmistakable smell of gasoline. "No," I whispered to myself, crawling toward the fireplace poker had left by the wall. My hands gripped it tightly. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. Flames flickered to life near the porch as one of them lit a match. The light danced across their faces. Karen's smirk glowed in the firelight. She was enjoying this. "You should have left when you had the chance, Rachel," she yelled. The fire grew, licking the edges of my deck. Smoke filled the air. I coughed, stumbling to my feet, desperate to find a way out. But every window was blocked by their shadows, their dark forms moving closer, trapping me inside. I bolted to the kitchen, grabbing the fire extinguisher. I pulled the pin and sprayed the flames on the deck, forcing the men to step back. White foam hissed as it smothered the fire, giving me a brief chance to breathe. "Call 911. I screamed, hoping one of the neighbors had heard. My own phone lay on the floor. The screen cracked from when I dropped it earlier. The men regrouped, circling the cabin, Karen's face twisted with rage. "Don't just stand there. Finish it," she shouted. Before they could make another move, the distant wail of sirens cut through the chaos. Red and blue lights glowed faintly through the trees, growing brighter every second. Karen's head snapped toward the sound. "Scatter," she hissed. The hooded figures bolted into the woods, disappearing like ghosts. Karen turned to follow, but as she ran, she slipped on the wet foam left by the extinguisher. She fell hard, scrambling to her feet just as the first police car skidded to a stop in my driveway. The officers jumped out, guns drawn. Hands in the air, one of them shouted. Karen froze, her chest heaving, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. She raised her hands slowly, glaring at me with pure hatred. The officers cuffed her on the spot. "You're under arrest for arson, attempted assault, and trespassing," one said. "This isn't over," Karen screamed as they dragged her toward the car. "You'll pay for this, Rachel. I'll make sure of it." I stood on the porch, shaking, the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes. Neighbors peeked from their windows, their faces pale in the flashing lights. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was finally over. The following days were quiet again, but the silence didn't comfort me this time. The fire had left scorched marks on the deck, a black reminder of how close I came to losing everything. The community rallied around. Emmy, Tom, and several others came by to help clean up. They brought food, tools, and their support. "You're stronger than all of us combined," one woman told me as she handed me a basket of muffins. I smiled weakly, grateful for their kindness. But deep down, I knew Karen wouldn't stay down for long. Women like her had a way of slipping through cracks in the law. My suspicion was confirmed 3 days later. I was sitting on the porch sipping coffee when my phone buzzed. It was a message from the sheriff's office. Karen had posted bail. My stomach dropped. I looked out at the lake, the water calm and peaceful, but I felt a storm brewing inside me. That night, I made sure every door and window was locked tight. I installed extra motion sensor lights and kept my fire extinguisher within reach. Around midnight, I heard the sound of an engine idling outside. Slowly, I peeked through the curtains. A black SUV sat at the edge of my driveway, its headlights off. I couldn't see who was inside, but I felt the eyes on me, watching, waiting. For an hour, the SUV didn't move. I stayed perfectly still, gripping the poker like a lifeline. Finally, it rolled away into the darkness. The next morning, I found something nailed to my door. A single sheet of paper, the words scrolled in red. "Marker, you will lose everything." My hands shook as I crumpled the note. That evening, I decided enough was enough. I called my lawyer and explained everything, every threat, every attack, every violation of my rights. He listened carefully, then said the words I had been longing to hear. "Rachel, it's time to take the HOA down." Hope flickered in my chest. We began gathering evidence, photos of the damages, recordings of Karen's threats, witness statements from the neighbors. Piece by piece, the case against her and her corrupt HOA started to build. But just as I was beginning to feel safe again, the storm returned. 2 nights later, I was jolted. Awake by a loud crash, my heart raced as I jumped out of bed. The smell of gasoline filled the air once again. When I rushed to the window, my blood ran cold. A line of fire snaked across my driveway, leading straight toward the cabin, and standing at the end of it, holding a lit flare in her hand, was Karen. Her smile was pure evil. Then she dropped the flare. The flare tumbled in slow motion, its fiery glow reflecting in Karen's cold eyes as it hit the gasoline trail with a sharp whoosh. Flames roared to life, racing toward my cabin like a snake made of fire. The heat hit my face even through the window. "No!" I screamed, grabbing the fire extinguisher again. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would break my ribs. I bolted out the door barefoot, spraying the flames as fast as I could. The hiss of the foam battled the crackle of fire, smoke stinging my eyes. Karen laughed, a chilling, triumphant laugh that made my skin crawl. "You can't stop this, Rachel. You can't stop me." Behind her, two more hooded figures appeared, tossing Molotov cocktails onto the lawn. They exploded into patches of flame, lighting up the night sky. The cabin was surrounded. Just when I thought I was done for, headlights blinded all of us. A truck roared into the driveway, horn blaring. It was Tom. He jumped out, wielding his own extinguisher, and sprayed the advancing flames. "Get back, Rachel," he shouted. The hooded men hesitated, unsure whether to keep going. "Drop it," Tom yelled at them, his voice shaking with fury. Karen snarled like a wild animal. "You traitor. You were supposed to stay out of this." Tom stepped closer, eyes burning. "You've terrorized this neighborhood long enough. Karen, it ends tonight." Before she could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air again, closer. This time, faster. Karen's eyes widened. She turned to run, but Tom grabbed her wrist, holding her just long enough for the police to arrive. The officers jumped out, shouting commands. The hooded men scattered into the woods, but Karen wasn't so lucky this time. She kicked and screamed as they dragged her to the ground, cuffing her hands behind her back. This time, the sheriff said, looking at her with disgust, "You're not walking away?" By the time the fire was out, my lawn was blackened, my porch scorched, and my hands trembling from the adrenaline. The police stayed with me until sunrise, taking statements, gathering evidence, and assuring me this attack was enough to put Karen away for a long time. I wanted to believe them. The neighborhood came together that morning, helping me clean up. Some brought breakfast, others tools, and many offered words of encouragement. The unity warmed my heart. For the first time, I felt like I belonged, not because of HOA rules, but because of real community. "We're with you, Rachel," one neighbor said. "Karen doesn't own this place. You do." Their support gave me strength. I worked with my lawyer to file restraining orders and lawsuits against Karen and the corrupt HOA board. Piece by piece, the walls she had built began to crumble. Days passed and I started to breathe again. The lake shimmered under the sun. The birds sang and life felt almost normal. Almost, because deep down I knew Karen wasn't finished. Even behind bars, someone like her would find a way to strike back. I was proven right one stormy night. A week later, lightning flashed across the lake as I sat on the porch sipping tea. The wind howled, rattling the windows. I was about to head inside when I saw movement near the tree line. My stomach dropped. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall, broad, wearing a hood. He wasn't alone. 3 more emerged behind him, each carrying something metallic in their hands. Tools, crowbars, chains. The leader spoke, his voice deep and cold. "Karen sends her regards." Before I could react, they rushed the cabin. The first swing of the crowbar shattered my porch railing. Rain poured harder, mixing with my own fear as I scrambled back inside, locking the door. The men pounded on it, their voices growling threats. The wood groaned under their assault. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 again, but the line crackled with static from the storm. No signal. Thunder boomed, drowning out their shouts as I backed into the corner, clutching the poker once more. The door splintered. A hand reached through the gap, tearing at the lock, and then boom. A blinding flash of light illuminated the entire yard as something massive crashed into the scene. For a second, I thought it was lightning, but then I heard the roar of an engine. Tom's truck again. This time, He wasn't alone. Half the neighborhood had followed him, headlights blazing, shouting as they charged toward the attackers. The hooded men hesitated, then bolted into the storm, disappearing into the darkness. As the neighbors gathered on my porch, drenched but determined, I realized something. I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. But Karen wasn't done, not by a long shot. The next morning, as the rain cleared, a package was delivered to my cabin. No return address. Inside was a single charred piece of wood from my porch wrapped with a note that read, "This was just a warning. The next time it won't be the porch." My blood ran cold, and I knew without a doubt that the final confrontation was coming. The sun rose slowly over the lake, casting a golden glow on the water. But for me, there was no peace in that sunrise. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the charred piece of wood and the note that came with it. The words burned into my mind, like a brand. The next time it won't be the porch. I knew what this meant. Karen had managed to send her message from wherever she was being held. She still had people on the outside willing to do her dirty work. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stand. I was tired of living in fear. That morning, I called my lawyer. "It's time," I said. "I want to shut the HOA down completely." He agreed. We gathered every bit of evidence: the arson attempts, the threats, the attacks, the witness testimonies from nearly every neighbor. The case was solid, but even with all this, I knew Karen wouldn't go down quietly. 2 days later, the hearing was scheduled. It was set to be held in the town's courthouse, and the entire neighborhood planned to attend. Tom promised to be by my side. "You're not walking into that room alone," he said. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me flinch. I kept the lights on, the doors locked, and my phone in hand. Around 2 a.m., I heard something. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I tiptoed to the window and looked out. A figure stood at the edge of my driveway. Even under the dim moonlight, I recognized that stance. It was Karen. Somehow, she was out. She looked thinner, her hair messier, but her eyes burned with the same hatred. Slowly, she raised a hand and waved, mocking me before disappearing into the trees. By the time morning came, I was running on coffee and nerves. Tom picked me up and we drove to the courthouse. The neighbors followed in their own cars, creating a convoy of support. When we arrived, Karen was already there standing with her lawyer. She wore a smug grin as if she knew something we didn't. The hearing began. My lawyer presented every piece of evidence: photos of the damage, videos of her screaming threats, the police reports from every incident. Neighbors testified one by one, telling the judge about the fear they had lived in for years under her control. Karen's lawyer tried to twist the narrative, painting her as the victim, but the truth was undeniable. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall, my voice steady. "She's not just a bad neighbor," I said. "She's dangerous. She's tried to burn my home down twice. She sent people to attack me. She's terrorized this community. Enough is enough." The judge listened carefully, his expression unreadable. When Karen was asked to testify, she unleashed a tirade, accusing everyone in the room of plotting against her. Her rage only made her look more unhinged. Finally, the judge gave his ruling. The HOA was to be dissolved immediately. Karen was stripped of all authority and fined heavily for damages. On top of that, she was sentenced to prison time for arson, assault, and conspiracy. The room erupted in relief. Some neighbors even cried. Tom clapped me on the back, smiling. "You did it, Rachel. You won." But as the officers led Karen away in handcuffs, she turned her head toward me, her eyes locked on mine and her lips curled into a chilling smile. "This isn't over," she whispered. For weeks after the ruling, things were calm. The lake returned to its peaceful state. The community flourished and I finally felt safe again. The scars on my porch were repaired. The yard was green again, and laughter replaced the tension that once hung in the air. But deep down, I knew Karen's words weren't empty. People like her don't fade quietly, they wait, they plot. They strike when no one expects it. One evening, as I watched the sunset over the lake, I heard a knock at my door. I hesitated, then opened it slowly. No one was there, only an envelope lay on the porch. Inside was a single photograph of me taken from the woods just hours earlier. On the back, scrawled in the same red marker as before, were the words, "You may have won the battle, Rachel, but the war has just begun." The wind howled through the trees, carrying a chill that sank deep into my bones. And in that moment, I realized the story wasn't ending here. It was only just beginning. The envelope with the photo haunted me. Every time I tried to sleep, I saw that image of myself standing on my porch, unaware someone had been watching from the woods. Karen might have been behind bars, but her reach stretched farther than I imagined. The days that followed were uneasy. The neighbors noticed my tension and checked in more often, but I didn't want to scare them. They thought the war was over. I wished I could believe that, too. A week later, I got a call from the sheriff. His voice was tight. "Rachel, I thought you should know. Karen escaped during a prison transfer." The phone almost slipped from my hand. "How?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She had help. We believe she's still in the area. Be careful." My heart raced. I thanked him and hung up, my hands trembling. The sun was setting outside. And for the first time in weeks, the lake looked ominous instead of calming. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept the lights on and the doors locked, pacing from room to room with the poker in hand. Every creak of the cabin made me jump. The woods were silent, too silent, as if they were holding their breath. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. The soft crunch of footsteps on gravel. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I crept to the window. There she was. Karen stood at the edge of the driveway, her hair wild, her clothes torn, her eyes glowing with something almost inhuman. She wasn't smirking this time. Her face was twisted with pure hatred. "You ruined me, Rachel," she hissed, her voice carrying through the night. "Now I'm going to take everything from you, just like you took everything from me." Before I could react, she lifted something shiny in her hand. A gun. My breath caught. I ducked behind the wall, just as the first shot shattered the window. Glass rained down and I crawled across the floor, heart pounding. She fired again, each bullet ripping through the cabin walls. "Come out," she screamed. "Face me." I grabbed my phone, but there was no time to call for help. I had to act fast. Moving as quietly as I could, I slipped out the back door and circled around, keeping low in the shadows. Karen kicked the front door open, stepping inside slowly, the gun sweeping from side to side. "Where are you, Rachel?" she taunted. "You can't hide forever." I crept up behind her, the poker gripped tight in my hands. My breath was shallow, my legs trembling, but I forced myself forward. She took one more step, and I swung with all my strength. The poker slammed into her arm, the gun clattering to the floor. She screamed in pain, spinning toward me with fury. We struggled, crashing into furniture, knocking over a lamp. "You don't belong here," she shrieked. "I do," I shouted back, shoving her against the wall. "This is my home." The neighbors hearing the commotion burst through the door moments later. Tom, leading the charge with a baseball bat in hand. Karen lunged for the gun, but Tom tackled her to the ground, pinning her until the police arrived. When they finally dragged her away in cuffs, she thrashed and screamed, her voice, "This isn't over, Rachel. I'll come back. You'll see." The sheriff looked at me, his face grim. "This time, she won't get out." The cabin was a mess, but I was alive. The neighbors stayed with me until sunrise, refusing to let me face the aftermath alone. The lake glistened in the early light, as if washing away the horror of the night. In the days that followed, Karen was sent to a high-security prison hundreds of miles away. The HOA was gone, the neighborhood was free, and peace finally returned to the lake. As I stood on my rebuilt porch weeks later, I looked out at the calm water and felt something I hadn't in months. Safety. Karen's shadow no longer hung over my life. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. And as the wind whispered through the pines, I realized something important. Sometimes the darkest battles bring out the strongest parts of who we are. This was my home, and no one, not even Karen, would ever take it from me again.